G'day guys, my name is LordTomos and welcome again to LordTomos comic pick. Now today's pick is more or less one that I wanted to do for a small while, but I wanted to read through the consecutive comics just to get myself more into it, to get more of a vibe of it before I start criticizing it or praising it too much without really jumping into the boats. Unlike the previous ones that I've done, which I've kind of did in a way, I kind of feel this one needed its merit in terms of value over a consecutive period of time. The actual comic that I'm more or less going to discuss, if not review-ish, as you can probably get from this thing, is Winter City. Every sin has a price. You can obviously see the various artists and you can obviously see the warning. This is based from the actual title itself, based by the slur, based by the more or less disclaimer that is more catered for the mature audience. And to be directly honest, I kind of see why it would be. Now, the general synopsis is you kind of have two halves of the actual story arc, which is pretty hard to pull off in my opinion in comics, simply because it's trying to alliterate two stories at the same time, in a way kind of merging them at the end. Now they haven't merged the stories and there'll probably be something down the track which I'm guessing is pardon me, which is guessing something that they're going to be doing more or less. Basically you have one half of the story where you have a young kid who, as the comic progresses, he progressively becomes older. His name's Sam. Now, without getting into too much detail, let's say he didn't have the best upbringing that you could possibly want for a kid. You could even dare say that his upbringing was pretty brutal, to say the least, which for the most part I guess builds character maybe, but he's more of a less timid sort of character, and he does play with the whole homage of, you know, sacrifice, well, not sacrifice so much sacrifice, but living through life through the harder means of life, if that's the best way to cater for his upbringing. Now, just to give you, without revealing too much of the story, because I do encourage you guys to pick this up. However, that being said though, this comic was more or less, if I'm not mistaken, made, produced and released for the Australian market. So unlike, you know, Marvel or DC, Image or any other third party or first party corporation, this was an exclusive more or less to Australia, which, to be honest, I'm full on supporting it. I'm really jumping onto the bandwagon here with this Winter City sort of comic. Now, pretty much in a nutshell, his upbringing more or less consists of beating, witnessing things that kids shouldn't witness as a kid, and just general, you know, gore of that nature, which, to be honest, I don't know how I would cope if that happened to me. But as the comic progresses, he does see the better side of life, the better light of life, and I guess he becomes more of a, I wouldn't say timid, becomes more self-aware of his emotions in a more spiritual / comic sort of aspect of it, which I think is not bad. That's the first half of the story arc, which more or less kind of happens in the first half of the comic, but also, depending on which comic you read, every bits and pieces. The second half of the comic is you have two detectives, Daniel and Harvey, if I'm not mistaken. These detectives are more or less following the progression of a mass murdering of linkage to a large corporation. Now, every witness that pretty much sees this mass murdering or has a glimpse of the mass murdering always depicts a grim reaper, which is always kind of the montage, if you could say, the killing point of the actual action part, or the action part of the actual comic itself. Now, that being said, it's pretty gruesome of how he kills them, how he's more or less decapitates them, depending on which comic you read, of course, how he pretty much beheads them, kills them, and all that sort of stuff. In this half, you more or less see just a Grim Reaper. You don't really make any different connection, not in the first two comics. Not in the first. You could make a definite connection in the first comic if you're, you know, keeping your eyes on things, but it kind of insinuates, it hasn't been revealed yet, it kind of insinuates that perhaps the first story arc connects to the story arc in a very, you know, intertwined sort of way. I wouldn't say it's killing the story, but you kind of feel like the kid in this beginning story arc is the Grim Reaper in the second story arc, but I feel they're going to be doing something more with it. It can't be that obvious. If it is, the storyline is probably much going to kill it for me. Now, in the second half, as I mentioned, two detectives are trying to find the killing of each individuals, which they later find out that it's a linkage to a part of a major corporation, and they're trying to find out this elusive Grim Reaper. So that's the general synopsis of the actual storyline. It's pardon me, it's pretty superficial. not superficial, it's pretty much surface level. It isn't too involved, it doesn't really make you want to think. It's pretty much good guy versus bad guy. Bad guy has, you know, some corrupt evil way. Good guy is some hardcore vigilante. Pretty, you know, like I said, pretty surface level. It's not the sort of comic book that I would personally read, simply because it's just one of those comics where it's just like, okay, you've given the hero, the protagonist, a pretty cliche backstory, build upon it, make me want to really, you know, cheer him on. In this comic, in the first comic, to me, I was kind of like, no, wasn't having it to me. Now that being said, as I was reading the first comic, I was semi-biased. I was actually going to make a video earlier, not today, of course, a few weeks back, to kind of to say the word, to slam it in a more critical manner. Now I was figured, you know what, that's not really my forte. I can't really, you know, jump on the bandwagon. I picked a few more comics. I think they're up to issue 6, if I'm not mistaken. I have issue 1 to 5. I put Winter City is part of my subscribe. It's grown on me. It's one of those comics that, the thing is, my views are based upon reading previous story arcs, reading previous story, more or less, pardon me, more or less stories, previous comics prior to this. So my knowledge and my expectations of certain comic literature is, dare I say, to a high standard, of course. Now, that's not saying that this isn't bad within itself. If you're new to the comic industry, if you're new to reading comics and you pick this up, this is definitely going to be your comic. This is going to be what kicks it in for you. It's pretty intuitive. The characters become likable down the track, which is definitely awesome. The graphics art is just sheer beauty. Just the coloring effect, just the dark homeless effect of his eyes. It really portrays a sense of, you know, of darkness, of chivalry, of pure just angst, if you can really say that word. It's just, there you go, you got the Grim Reaper kicking ass right there. And so it really does kind of give you the whole, well, this is pretty deep, pretty dark. You know, this guy even goes ahead and kills our dog, so you can say it's pretty pretty awesome in that regard. And you just have, of course, a better picture of the Grim Reaper there. Now, there is one picture that I really wanted to show you, just to show you the beauty of this art style, of the beauty of the artists themselves. He's just pretty much just a back picture of the Grim Reaper. Yeah, I fell in love with the design, the actual comic. Now, that to me is a definite pro. Like I said, it's the storyline is intuitive in its own right. It's pretty creative. You can really start to build a bond, if you can really say that, for the actual protagonist, and it kind of makes you question certain things of the actual comic. And of course, the art style just seals the deal. That being said, this is, to me, personal opinion, of course, caters to the beginner comic readers, those who just pick up a comic and say, what's this? This is definitely the catch for you. It's definitely something to get your foot into the door without really expecting too much of a storyline, just getting to actions, which, if I can really make a discussion out of this, maybe down the track, I would like to talk to somebody about this, kind of have an interview sort of thing. My general vibe with the comic industry is that they're, depending on the audience, they're more or less catering to less story, more action, which isn't bad. That's to be expected with the comic industry. The comic superheroes, your superhero, mess things up. But I'm more or less the sort of guy that there's no point is to have power without a story. You know, you can't have blowing things up, and there will be comics down the track which I will discuss more or less into that. But I'm a big thing with stories. You know, art and story. That to me really, pardon me, really sells it for me. I think anyway, that's obviously what's my things. Obviously, as you grow older and younger, different expectations, different likes, different, you know, dislikes, that sort of stuff. This sells it for me if you're a beginner comic. Now, being a veteran comic reader that I have, I've picked, you know, of course, numerous sort of comics down the track. I've got about 6-7 boxes. No, I've got about 8, 9 different boxes filled up with comics that I've read throughout the throughout the past. Now, coming into this, granted, I was biased. I was extremely skeptical of the story. I was really, truth be told, I was really having a negative view on this comic, and it's unlike me, especially when reading comics and that sort of stuff. I have a more critical view when watching cartoons. I'm just like, yeah, BS on that. But with comics, I'm very trying to be more open. This one, the first comic I was, granted, I was critical. I was kind of like, I was like, this is crap. This is like Spawn. For those of you who read Spawn, was, you know, back in the 90s. This is very Spawnish. This is trying to, you know, capitalize on the whole dark aspect of it, etc, etc, etc. But that being said, after I put the comic down, I'm just saying, like, you know what, I need to pick up the other back issues. I just need to, for my own gratification, for my own, you know, for my own pardon me, for my own sort of, you know, views on the actual comic itself. So I went back to my local comic store, picked up the rest, read through them, and you know what, I fell in love with them. Granted, the storyline to me is very, like I said, service level. There's a certain appeal to the comic. There's this, you know, when you like something, it's really hard to describe simply because you like it. You get this fondness out of it. That's how it is with this comic, Winter City. It just grew on me exponentially after the second, third, fourth, and the fifth issue. For whatever reason, it just really captivated me. So that being said, I was just like, you know what, I'm going to stick with it. I think now would be the best time to make this more or less discussion review. True, granted, so like I said, storyline super level, but the artistic style is absolutely to be adored. It's very fine-tuned. They very, you know, they captivated they really grabbed essence of emotion, of intensity, of just individuality, and that to me is one of the hardest things you can really pull off creating, you know, any cartoon or even a comic, because in a cell, in a little box, in a page, you need to grab enough life in that comic, in that one segment, that you can't almost do in a movie, like you can do in a movie and you can do in an animation, but in a comic it's very hard to really capture emotion. And each page that I was looking at, I was just like, you know what, the artist really does know what they're doing. They really are pushing for a storyline that I really adore. So it grew to me. If I can really have a nitpick in this comic, obviously besides that the storyline is service level, would probably be my general concerns of the overall story arc. Now it feels like it's going to come to a conclusion very fast, very shortly. That being said, of course, I'm not 100% sure if this is like a mini-series or if it's going to be like an ongoing series. I'm hoping it's an ongoing series. I see very good potential with this. I just wish, pardon me, I just wish they would add more, you know, more hints of a possible continuation. I feel like being, you know, being a creator of a comic, it's pretty hard to basically have a foresight of having a continuation of comic if it doesn't sell. If it doesn't sell, you're losing money. If you're losing money, then you can't really continue making the comic because, you know, it's not making you a living. Sad world we live in, but it's the reality of the situation. They're not going to continue a series. Take Blue Beetle. They finished Blue Beetle at issue 18, I think it was, just because there wasn't enough fan interest in it, which I was a major fan of it, to be honest, the Blue Beetle. But unfortunately, that's the reality of the situation, and you gotta support your local guys. That's why I always recommend any guys who go into comic stores, if there's something you like and you flick through a few pages and it really sells you, pick up the comic, buy it. You know, that's money in that guy's pockets, you know what I mean? I'm not a big fan, which is obviously a different discussion, I'm not a big fan of people going into comic stores, reading an issue and walking out, and then coming back the next month reading the second issue and like, what are you doing? Like, go back home, you know what I mean? Just buy the issue if you're interested, you know what I mean? But anyway, that's my general, you know, thoughts on this actual comic. It's definitely something to pick up if you're an absolute new beginner to comic collecting, comic reading, and all that sort of stuff. Go in, pick it up, have a quick read, enjoy it, embrace it, love it, and continue reading, of course. For more veterans, if not veterans, more master class collectors / readers and what other stuff, you might not necessarily want to pick this up. I don't have to give you my reasons why. Obviously you would have heard about this comic, you would have, you know, made your own assertion out of this, but to be honest, I would recommend you stick with it, simply because it's an Australian, you know, author and you know, drawers and all that sort of stuff that's making this comic, and simply because it does have this sort of weird connection. It's gonna progress into something more kind of, you know, more massive, more explosive than what it is now, and I hope it does, to be honest. So like I said, I'm gonna have to end this quick, simply because I don't want to make these videos to be quick. But look, yeah guys, it's definitely worth a pickup, if not a read, if not a quick glance, and just go out there and keep on reading. Anyway guys, if you have any suggestions, hit me up. I'm more than happy to basically go into. If not, you know, continue watching these guys. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me on this comic more or less discussion. Anyway guys, take care and peace out.